float through the currents and sometimes torrents of life. But Torah can be so much more than that. It is to me. Torah is the ability and the opportunity to learn with, and I think from one another. And I think that's on great display this morning, whether it is virtually or in person. Still the ability to come together and delve into traditions that are shared and traditions that are not shared. Torah is an inheritance. It's my birthright. It's what I am obligated as a Jew to toil in, and what I have a right to leave my mark on, and in turn, pass on that obligation to others. Torah, though, is not just one moment, one solitary moment in time. Torah is revelation. Torah transcends time. It transcends space. Torah is the spark that ignites the flames of the Jewish experience. And once that experience dies down, Torah are the embers after those flames have subsided, which in turn ignite a new flame, where a new flame is able to be kindled from. I think it is the anchor of the Jewish people, both collectively and individually. And perhaps most importantly, it's where we first come to encounter the one, the God of our ancestors, the rock of our descendants, and it is where we come to know our own selves through its ancient lines and everlasting message that we come into experience today.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of creation, who has commanded us to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Thank you so much, Josh. We move to the beginning of the second part of the service, to the Baruch She'amar. And the Baruch She'amar is all about the power of speech, the ways in which the divine spoke creation into being, and we, as beings created in God's image, B'Tselem Elohim, have the opportunity through speech to create. And perhaps we are more acutely aware of that given our physical distance from one another, but still having the opportunity to see each other's faces and to exchange in words of Torah and words of wisdom and words of love and compassion. So Baruch She'amar is our entryway into the second part of the service this morning. Baruch She'amar ve'haya olam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Oseh v'rishit, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, Baruch Gozer u'mkayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov le're'av, Baruch chai la'ad ve'kayam lanetzach, Baruch podeh u'matzil, Baruch shemo, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, ha'el ha'av ha'rachaman, המלולל בפי עמו, משובח ונפאר בלשון חסידיו ועבדיו, ובשירי דוד עבדך, נהללך אדוני אלוהינו, בשבחות ובזמרות, נגדלך ונשבחך ונפארך, ונזכיר שמך ונמליכך מלכנו אלוהינו, יחיד חי העולמים, מלך משופח ומפואר עד שמו הגדול, Baruch atah Adonai, melech meulal batishbachot. We turn next to Ashrei, which Leah is going to lead us in here. And just one statement about Ashrei. It is a prayer of presence. It's about recognition of the fact that we are here now and have the opportunity to participate in this soulful activity, whatever else is happening in our lives. Leah.
going to do some more chanting. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha ואנחנו נברך ים מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה. Hallelujah, 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 Bekocho, hallelujah, Berkiauzo. Hallelujah, Bigurata. Hallelujah, Kerokula. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, Beteka Shofar. Hallelujah, Benevel Lechinar. Hallelujah, Betofu Machor. Hallelujah, Bemini Veuga. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, Betzil Tzlei Shama. Hallelujah, Betzil Tzlei Chua. Kodesh Shama. Tehalelia, kol neshama, tehalelia, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
We wind down the selections from Psukei de Zimra, the second part of our service, with the prayer of Yishtabach. And here we reiterate that the God to whom we are praying, with whom we are in relationship, is a God who delights in song. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ. כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שיר ושפחה, הלל וזמרה, עוז וממשלה, נצח גדולה וגבורה, תהילה ותפארת קדושה ומלכות, ברכות והודעות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אלכי העולמים. At this point in the service, I want to introduce a brief mystical intention, a kavanah, from the great Mikubal, the great 16th century teacher, Rabbi Isaac Luria. And it's a simple intention, but one that I hope will carry us into the heart of the service. All that we've done thus far is preparation to move into the Shema and the Amidah, and to try and move closer together through this experience in community. And so Luria devised this beautiful intention in which he simply invites us to take upon ourselves yet again this morning and this day the biblical injunction of Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your neighbor as yourself. And the way that Luria understands this intention in this moment is that if we want to try and help to bring together the various cosmic forces, male and female, that are a part of the plurality within the oneness of the divine, that it requires work both vertically and horizontally, if you will. That is, ben adam lemakom, between the individual worshiper and the work that she does to try and bring together these cosmic forces into alignment. But that is not enough. That alone will not suffice, because we need to do the same in terms of our relationships, ben adam lechavero, between one human being and the other. So here's a brief chant, which I've called here, Love Unifies, the mystical intention. Hareni mekabel alai et mitzvat habore ve'afta re'acha kamocha re'acha kamocha hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat habore ve'afta l'reacha kamocha re'acha kamocha. With that kavanah in mind, we move to the next piece of our tefillah, which is preparation for the Shema, the Ahava Rabbah, in which we speak of God's abounding love for all of us. Leah, whenever you are ready, we're ready to sing and to chant with you and to move into the Shema thereafter.
All right, so here we're just singing, again, a few lines, beginning with the Ha'er Enenu, about 5 lines from the bottom if you're in the Hebrew, and same 6 lines from the bottom in the transliteration. The Ha'er Enenu betoratecha ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה. וליראת שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד. ידה ידה דה, ידה ידה דה, ידה ידה, ידה דה ידה יה, יה ידה ידה, ידה ידה ידה, ידה ידה דה, yada 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 וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת, להודות לך ולאחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. We breathe in the oneness. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. We're going to carry forward, moving at our own pace into the Amidah, using perhaps the words of a Siddur or the words of our own heart, knowing that Amidah is the prayer in which we stand before God. So perhaps you will rise in body and quite literally stand, or perhaps you will sit mindfully and with intention so that you can talk to God. You can speak with the words of your heart, to ask what is on your heart, to ask for the needs of your community and of the people of the world and of the whole world. So I invite you to move at your own pace, and I'll call us back in a few moments, or a few minutes rather, with more music.
Leah, if you would, help us draw this part of our tefillah to a close with the final words from the Amidah, Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom Bimrolah, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Ve'imru Amen.
I'm going to end this Shacharit service with one final prayer, a contemporary tefillah that was written by a rabbinic colleague of ours, Sheila Peltz-Weinberg, and appropriately, it's Sheila's interpretation of Tfilat HaDerech, the traveler's prayer, and it is something that many Jews say traditionally when they actually go on a physical journey. Since our theme this morning is journeying through the seasons and preparing our hearts in these uncharted times, I thought it would be appropriate to read this prayer before closing the service and handing things over to my colleagues from Boston College and Boston University. Traveler's Prayer, a prayer for the journey. We could say it every day when we first leave the soft warmth of our beds and don't know for sure if we'll return at night. When we get in the trains, planes, and automobiles and put our lives in the hands of many strangers. Or when we leave our homes for a day, a week, a month, or more, will we return to a peaceful home, untouched by fire, flood, or crime? How will our travels change us? What gives us the courage to go through that door? A prayer for the journey we take in this fragile vessel of soul and of flesh. A finite number of years, and we will reach the unknown where it all began. Every life, every day, every hour is a journey, and the travel is the discovery, the wisdom, the joy. Every life, every day, every hour is a journey. In the travel is the reward, the peace, the blessing. With that, I want to thank Leah and Josh for helping to facilitate the Shacharit service this morning, and for all of you who are out there sharing your energy, your hopes, your prayers, your fears, your laments. I'm going to ask my dear colleague Andrew Davis from Boston College to help usher us into the next stage of our program this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Or, and thank you again to you, Leah, and Josh for leading us through that prayerful introduction to our event today. Today, I just wanted to, at this time, officially welcome everyone to this event and to take some time to give a little background on the event and a very brief preview of what this morning will entail, and then also to hand it over to a BC STM student, Sierra, who will lead us in another musical meditation. So officially, on behalf of the entire planning team for this event, welcome to this Preparing Our Hearts event. We have over 100 participants registered, and I am looking at the participant roll on the bottom now, and we're ticking up to a full complement of our enrollees. And not only do we have over 100 enrollees, but we have all three schools, BU School of Theology, Boston College School of Theology and Ministry, and Hebrew College, fairly evenly represented across the enrollment, and a few other visitors from other institutions. So welcome to everyone. A little bit of background, this is the third event we've done of this sort. Colleagues at BC School of Theology and Ministry, BU School of Theology and Hebrew College got together a few years ago and decided, with the coincidence of Passover and Easter, it would be nice in our local community to find ways to gather together for prayer, for conversation, for shared learning across our different religious traditions. And so the first event took place a couple years ago. We had an event last year, and this was to be the third event, and it was originally planned by us to be live in person at Temple Beth Zion in Brookline. And the theme of this event for today was supposed to be journey, our journey, the theme of journey in these holiday seasons, whatever your religious tradition is. With the coronavirus, our own journey in planning this event took a turn, an unexpected turn. And when it became clear that we would not be able to hold the event in person at Temple Beth Zion as planned, our planning committee got together to decide if we should continue with the event or cancel it or continue it online. And our planning team was unanimous that we should proceed with the event and move it online, because our feeling was that now more than ever, students and members of our community would be hungry for connecting with each other in our isolated situations. And I have to say that to see so many people enrolled and to see so many present on this online format, it's wonderful to see that our intuition was correct, and that this has become a space for people, probably for many people who would not have been able to attend the in-person event, to share in this opportunity to pray together, to speak together, and to learn together. Given the circumstances, we've changed the format slightly. For one thing, we've continued the theme of journey in this season, but one slight adjustment is that we've asked the panel to speak, to bring in our current circumstances into their reflection. So the questions that our moderator will lead our panelists through involve both the theme of journey as well as the present situation with the coronavirus. That's one major innovation. Another innovation is there's no food, unfortunately. If this is an in-person event, you'd be enjoying some delicious breakfast items, but I hope you have some at your home that you can enjoy on your own. A third innovation this year, which was part of the original planning, was that we've had student involvement in the planning. In the past two events, it's just been the planning team of colleagues from our three schools, but this year we involved students from all three schools, and they are the ones who have put together the planning for the small group sessions. And so we're delighted with their contributions and glad that the circle of people involved in the planning has expanded to include our students, who are probably our most important constituent that we work with. And I think that's about it. So the planning, as you know from the flyer, we had the wonderful SHACHARIT service led by Or and Hebrew College students. We'll begin momentarily with a panel of our three deans from the three schools, moderated by Dr. Teddy HickmanMaynard, and then we will move into small groups or breakout sessions here on Zoom. And each breakout session will have a student or faculty staff moderator to facilitate the discussion. And then we'll close with some musical meditations. So that's the extent of my welcome. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to one of my students, Sierra Kilpatrick, a student at BC STM, who will lead us in another musical meditation, and then I'll come back on and hand it over to our moderator. So Sierra, if you're there and can unmute.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. So as we prepare to enter into the rest of our day today, I wanted to offer another musical meditation to move us into the rest of our morning in light of journeying into our seasons of celebration in a new way, a strange and unprecedented way. I wanted to offer this song by Sam Baker, and the words I hope can serve as a prayer for us as we move into celebrating together and preparing our hearts together for these holidays that, despite the darkness and the fear, that we can do so in peace and hope, and despite the darkness. Go in peace, go in kindness, go in love, go in faith. Leave the day behind us. Day is done. Go in grace. Let us go into the dark, not afraid, not alone. Let us hope by some good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Go in peace, go in kindness, go in love, go in faith. Leave the day behind us. Day is done. Go in grace. Let us go into the dark, not afraid, not alone. Let us hope by some good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Let us hope by some good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Go in peace, friends.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Teddy Hickman-Maynard, who will be the moderator for our Dean's panel. Dr. Teddy, please.
Teddy, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. If you'd start again.
Okay. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful event. And I especially want to thank those who've led us in worship this morning. It's been an incredible start to the day. I certainly needed it. I hope others feel likewise. And it's really heartening to see so many at this meeting this morning. I think this is a testimony to the importance of community in these days. I think that um, the upside of this crisis that we're going through right now is that I think it's caused more and more people to think about the big things in life in terms of what's important, what are our priorities, who we are, why we are, what we're here for. And those are the kinds of questions that certainly our schools think about all the time. But it is nice to have the country join us in that rumination and in those reflections. This morning, we're grateful to have three incredible leaders to help us dive even further into deep reflection about what this present moment with the COVID-19 pandemic, what this present moment is causing us to think about, and what it's calling on us to retrieve from our traditions in order to make our way through these moments. And so I'm very grateful to have with us Rabbi Dan Judson, Dean of the Rabbinical School at Hebrew College, Reverend Dr. Mary Elizabeth Moore, Dean and Professor of Theology and Education at Boston University School of Theology, and Father Thomas D. Stegman, Dean and Professor of New Testament at Boston College School of Theology and Ministry. We're going to ask them a number of questions, but I also want to say to our three panelists, please don't fear if your answers to the first question delve a little bit into the other questions we're going to ask. I don't want you to feel constricted in any way. Certainly, all of the questions are related to this matter of how our traditions and the time that we're thinking about in these holy days can help us as we think about how to be in these moments. So I want to ask this first question. How has your personal journey through this liturgical season been influenced by the coronavirus pandemic? What's been the same for you and what's been different for you? And so I want to start with Dean Judson, if you might share first.
Thank you, Teddy. People can hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
great. So first again, as Teddy did, I just want to express my appreciation to the group that put this together. The group from Hebrew College, Tom and Marilyn and Orr, thank you so much for your help in this. And again, as well to the service leaders this morning, just beautiful, beautiful music. So thank you all. I would say to be honest, I would say I've been deeply affected, as I think a lot of people here have when thinking about Passover. I am going to do the same things that I normally do, but it just feels different this year in the following way. Normally by this time, I'm full on plotting and planning how to clean my house and remove all of my dishes and pots and pans and replacing them with Passover pots and pans and Passover dishes. And I'm plotting to get food and I'm full on planning. And this year, it's just occurring to me now that I have to do those things. And it feels in some ways almost a little beside the point to be changing my house over with all of its dishes, where normally that is something that I take sort of, I never take joy in cleaning my house, but it marks for me the beginning of this transition of this season. And this year it feels somehow, oh right, I have to do that when my attention and my focus is on so many other things. So I have to say, come to this season with less enthusiasm than I normally do, to be honest. And I would say the other way that this season is impacted for me quite massively, as I think for most people celebrate Passover, is simply the Seders, which are the sort of central way that I'm observing Passover. normally are had with my entire family. And this year, it's just going to be my wife and my kids. Not that I don't love seeing my wife and my kids, but I see them all the time. And this is the moment where I observe usually one night with a group of wonderful friends, and we have a sort of a tremendous Passover Seder with games and music, and everybody's sort of involved deeply. And another night with my brothers and my sister, and it's a kind of extended family, and none of that is going to happen this year. And it feels quite odd and quite isolating. And my mother-in-law lives alone. She's almost 90. There's no way to get to her for Passover. It would be unsafe. For the first time in the 90 years of her life, she's really not going to have Passover this year. And it's stunning. This is somebody who, for 90 years of her life, she began observing Passover as a young, I was just speaking with her about this, which is why I'm thinking about it. She observed Passover in Hungary. There was, even not to be too melodramatic, she observed Passover. She was a survivor, even in the concentration camps. There was at least a nod, an understanding that today was Passover. When it comes to Passover this year, there's nothing anybody can do. She's going to be alone. And the whole thing feels quite odd and quite destabilizing. And so Passover is going to be, for me, massively affected. I will do the same things. We will have the ritual with my family. It will be lovely that my immediate family will be together, but it will be very different. And I think, in some ways dispiriting in itself. I'm sorry to say, we will make the best of it, and I will, as was said, try to call upon the spiritual resources that Passover provides, but it will be different and dispiriting to some degree. I hate to begin on a down note. I apologize.
Teddy, do you want to continue with the other panelists and unmute yourself?
I am happy to keep talking because I'm a rabbi, so I can do that and go on and on. But I did want to keep I didn't want to over talk, particularly on Zoom.
I needed the host. I forgot that I shouldn't mute myself because I need the host to unmute me. So I would ask those of us who are presenting in this moment, Rabbi Judson and Dean Moore, Dean Stegman, if we could actually all leave our microphones open so that the hosts don't have to continue to unmute us each time we speak. And we'll just do our best to keep our home environments as calm and quiet as possible. If a 5 or 3-year-old come jumping in behind me, I will do my best to escort them out of the room as quickly as possible. But I'm going to leave my my line open so that the hosts don't have to go back and forth with us. Dean Moore, if you might take on that same question, how has this moment affected your personal journey through this season?
First of all, I want to say thank you very much to Dan and the story of your mother-in-law. Overwhelming. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm extremely grateful for the time we have today. I've attended this almost every year, and it's meant a lot to me. And I think being together during this season of Passover, Lent, and Easter is very powerful interreligiously. I'll just say very quickly that a couple of years ago, a dear friend invited my daughter and me to join her family in Seder, and it was a powerful time. The storytelling, the Seder ritual, which I had done before, but this one was so intimate and so powerful. Seder came close to Easter at that point, and I realized just a few days later when I was celebrating Easter, I the meaning of Easter was much deeper and more intimate than it sometimes is. It was not because of connections between Passover and Lent, Easter. It was because the intimacy of religious celebration in one community is somehow tied to the intimacy of religious celebration in another. We're bound somehow by our religious depths. So I was very touched by the worship this morning and the music, and thank you so very much. The question is really a very powerful one for me, and the journey through Lent is a journey. So I love the theme, and it's a journey, though, that is not toward glory. It's a journey toward the cross, as we celebrate our honor and Christian tradition. So it's not a journey that's easy and filled with smoothness. It's a journey that's filled with toughness and awareness that whatever is going to be at the end of this journey is going to be upturning. It's going to be life-changing. That kind of journey is already daunting. And this particular year, with the flaming of the coronavirus and it's overtaking the world, the journey seems particularly arduous. And the situation we're in makes Lent, for me, even more meaningful. At the moment, in these days, I've been absorbed with experience that I cannot even see, but I can imagine the experience of immigrants trapped at borders and small places with inadequate food, water, air, certainly not social distancing. I'm feeling the pain of people who actually have the coronavirus and those who are caring for people who have the coronavirus and those who are near death. The pain of people in different parts of the world and in different kinds of communities, people who live in communities that are closely bound to one another and that don't allow the kind of social distancing that my family and I have the privilege to enjoy. The healthcare workers, all of these are weighing heavy. So my attention is on the presence and suffering of God. I have a strong sense that God must be suffering enormously right now, must be in pain with all of this hurt, tragedy, and escalation that's taking place, and the failure of humans to do anything about it, to act in ways that we know we could act in order to stem the virus and eventually to end the virus. So the pain of this, I'm feeling internally. I can only imagine the pain that God is feeling. But the very thought that God is feeling that pain and is with us in this journey is hope-giving and reassuring. In terms of my personal journey, I've been aware this has been a painful season for me personally, and I actually have not had the luxury to give attention to it. But this is my last semester as dean. So to be living as dean in my last semester with this virus taking hold has meant that I've had to let go of everything. Not everything, but I've had to let go of a great deal. I've had to let go of my own dreams that I would bring a lot of things into a strong place before I stepped out of the deanship, because everything has moved into a different orbit. I've had to give up one after another, and each one has been filled with pain, but not pain I have the luxury to stop and experience. I just acknowledge it and move on. It also, there's another kind of pain that's more personal for me. I'm a person who is not generally invited to speak. This is one of those very rare moments. not in the Boston region, not in the BTI, not in the university, not anywhere, and not in the churches. I'm a behind the scenes person, I think. My son called me, and this was going to be a semester in which there was going to be a lot of celebration for me and with me. I was invited to speak on a panel in a BU thing. I was invited to do this. I was invited to preach in my church. This is happening, but none of the other things are happening. The event that was planned for me is not happening, at least not in the same kind of way. And none of the events that BU would have sponsored for me are happening. So I've recognized that underneath my being right now is a stream of sadness. Because after a lifetime of giving myself, and after more than 40 years of giving myself in theological education, and more than 11 in BU School of Theology, and giving my all, there's not even a way for me to experience the joy of closure, and that is feeling heavy. My son called me about 3 weeks ago, and he gave me a little lecture about staying home and being careful and all those kinds of things. Very sweet call. And he said, "So how are you feeling about all this?" And I said to him, I'm feeling, and I said some things about the school and about Rebecca and me, my daughter and I. And I then said, "But I'm feeling the sadness." And I shared with him what I've said to you. But then I ended with these words. I said, "My life has always been about supporting other people and about doing things for others. And I've always been a person to be in the background. And this was going to be my semester. And I was going to get to experience some of the honor." And I recognized, and I teared up. And I thought, wow, this is deeper than I was willing to recognize. So for me, and I need to finish up, sorry. For me, Lent has been a time of recognizing that nothing is permanent. God was here before we were. God is here with us now, and God will be forever. And we do our very tiny, small parts along the journey. And let's hope that those parts make a difference. One last quick comment. In recognizing what I've shared with you, you're the only people I've shared this with, except for my son, because I recognize that other people are in much, much more difficult situations than I. But I recognize with Lent that every single person's situation matters, and that being in touch with our own and dwelling on our own can be self-absorbing, but being in touch with our own as a connector with the even greater pains and struggles of others is a way to be on this journey together and with God.
Thank you, Dean Moore. And I just want to say on behalf of everyone listening, I feel genuinely privileged and honored that you would trust us with those feelings in this moment. And I'm so appreciative of this space, this sacred space that we've created online for all of us to share in this moment together. And so thank you so much for your reflections. Dean Stegman, I wonder if you might come behind her now and share how this is affecting you personally.
Well, thank you. And let me say two remarks as prolegomena. First, my apologies for coming in a little bit late. I came in during Sierra's beautiful musical prayer. I was involved with the senior leadership meeting here at BC, so I apologize for being late. Secondly, I'd like to say something to and about Dean Moore, with whom I work. We do a lot of Zoom meetings. She's been a wonderful colleague. I just want to put something out without going into detail, but Dean Moore is the in terms of the board of the BETI, is the chair of that board, and I work with her on the executive committee. She has worked long and heroically to keep things together. We've been in a big transition this year, and there's been a lot of factors, and you talk about behind the scenes labor of love for primarily the good of our students, the students of our respective institutions, and she deserves our appreciation and recognition. And I was saddened to get the email last week about the April celebration that's been postponed, and I hope they're able to have something for Dean Moore. So I just want to say that to the group. On a personal level, I don't want to share too much, but this Lenten journey and the coronavirus has been kind of a continuation of a very difficult year for me, because I starting last July, I'm dealing with a very significant health issues. I am in my room at the Jesuit community right now. I've been here for some time because my religious superior has asked me to stay in because my treatments, my immune system is very compromised, and so I'm sharing this because one of the things that the new realities that the coronavirus has brought to our institutions is just reinforcing some things I tell the medical teams. I have to go through a lot of treatments, and I said, I joke with them at Brigham and Women's and at Dana-Farber. I joke with them and say, y'all are good for my spiritual life because you're reinforcing some fundamental lessons that I teach my students, and I've tried to live in my life, but I have to live very dramatically. And those two lessons are: one, I'm not in as much control of things as I'd like to think. I'm not God of my life. And secondly, I need others. I need my medical professionals. But this coronavirus, I think, is really reinforcing, and I've been very edified at our school how the people are reacting and really wanting somehow to maintain a sense of community and solidarity. And how do we do that and to be intentional? It can be a little bit tempting, at least for me, but I think for many of us, to think of the Lenten journey more from a personal perspective, and there has to be that personal investment in the season, but it really is, and we learned this certainly from our Jewish brothers and sisters, is about being part of a people and journeying together, and that's really been reinforced in a poignant way. On weekends, I help out at a parish, and it's very painful for me, both personally as a priest who likes to minister, who likes to preside at the Eucharistic liturgy, who likes to preach, who feels it's a great privilege to be able to celebrate and give communion to others, not to be able to do that. But it's also, I'm aware of how hard this is for the faithful. That which would typically give us a sense of comfort and being with one another and praying with and for one another and being able to support one another, have that understandably taken away from us these days. It's personally been very challenging. But having said this, I live in a community of Jesuits where my small community, we can gather to celebrate the Eucharist each day, and we do. And we pray, and especially for those who can't do what we're doing, we're very aware of that privilege. And what I try to tell the Jesuit students here is, this is not just about us, this is not about our privilege, but we should be very aware of what we're able to do, and that our prayer should be for those who can't join us, and that what we are being strengthened to do is to be more effective ministers to bring God's love and compassion to others going forward. As we know, the traditional pious practices in these seasons are prayer and fasting and almsgiving. And these practices have been very much transformed, at least for me, in this season. I was very gratified and edified by a group of folks at our school who have put together and continue to put together a daily liturgical exercise that we're able to do online. So we're calling it STM liturgy from a distance, or with social distancing. That sense that prayer is not only for one another, but with one another. And that is only God who's going to get us through this. And this is making very plain to me, and I think to many of us, that hole that we all have in our hearts can only be filled by God. Once in a while, I'm sure those of you who preach or who have the privilege to break open the Word, this happens on occasion to me, that we're called to practice what we preach. And a couple weeks ago, or last week, I encouraged our students in a little letter, said, why don't we think of fasting not so much about the food, but some of these things that have been taken from us. We're not necessarily choosing to do this, but we might reframe these situations, these things that we're used to doing, can't do anymore. Is that a way that we can think of fasting and sacrificing and recognizing what really our deep down hungers are and should be, to hunger for justice and righteousness, to hunger for God's love in our own lives and the lives of others. And this has been brought home to me. I got a call last Sunday from my superior. He said, I want you staying in your room. And that's hard. But to reframe this as a way of fasting and those things that it's not about my agenda, setting that aside, those ways that I might put myself before God and others. So that's been something. And then in terms of almsgiving, I really think, and we're experiencing this, I've been very touched by the generosity of people. I think, how can we be generous with one another? Well, first of all, to abide by the restrictions in place and to embrace and understand them for what they're trying to do, and to grow in compassion. Mary Elizabeth or Dean Moore beautifully laid out the big world picture of people who are in need of our compassion. And I think the last thing I would say is, this might go into some of the next questions, but in our lectionary, the Gospel of John starts taking precedence. And last Sunday we had the story of the man born blind who was healed. And there's so many elements to that story that are important, but some of the blindness in that story is not physical blindness, but blindness to the truth. And I find myself called to be more and more committed to naming truth, and the truth that's around us in our world, the truth that's around us in our country, the truth, and Mary Elizabeth again was intimating some of this, and our social discourse, and our political discourse. I think part of our ministry now, and I think this season of Lent is leading me toward, is really being willing to speak out for those whose lives are suffering, to name the truth of what's really going on, and what we as a people, as people who feel called by God, who are enlightened by God, who are formed by God, how do we bring that good news? How do we bring that love to others in this context? So I will stop there. I've gone too long.
No, Dean Stegman, that was excellent, because you've actually just answered the next question, which is, what are the traditions that we can draw upon, that you might encourage people to really delve into those those aspects of their tradition that are salient for this moment. And you've done that in talking about the importance of fasting and almsgiving and expressions of generosity in whatever way this momentary social arrangement allows us to do. So I want to go back to Dean Judson and ask, from the Jewish tradition, what are some of those themes and traditions or practices that you might lift up in this moment, for those of us who are seeking wisdom for how to be?
Great. Thank you, Teddy. Just want to reflect what a privilege it is I feel to be on to be speaking alongside Dean Moore and Dean Stegman. Really, just such words of grace and profound truth. So I'm just appreciative for both of you and what you shared. I want to take I guess I want to take the question slightly differently and take us to maybe an unexpected place. But at these times, I feel like people dig into, they do what they are most find comfort in doing. So for me, that means two things. One is books and fiction, and the other is history. So I want to, I have spent the last, some of my students have heard this, but I've spent the last week at night really trying to look at, this is maybe a strange place to take this, but I've been looking at what Jewish newspapers in the early 20th century said about the influenza epidemic, and thinking about what the Jewish communal response was and what we could learn. And so I just want to reflect on that for a minute. Quickly. I found the most incredible article last night in the Philadelphia Jewish newspaper from 1918. A group of 1,200 Jews gathered in a graveyard to marry two unmarried people who were too old to have gotten old at the time. They were spinsters at the time and no hope of marriage. And they were married, and everybody walked by them and gave them money as a gift for their new life. This ceremony was incredible. It was a replayal, or excuse me, that's not the right word. A continuation of ceremonies that were done in Eastern Europe. When plagues would come to Eastern Europe, there was this custom, which is very obscure and obviously extremely superstitious, and I can't even describe to you or unpack necessarily the superstitions and theology involved in it, but it's certainly odd that 1,000 people gathered in a graveyard to perform a wedding from two people who were unexpectedly married. Something unusual was happening, and it was because, of course, people were resorting to superstition at a time when they didn't know what was going on and couldn't quite understand or fathom why this devastation was happening. So in 1918, we know that 650,000 people died, and it was ravaging communities very quickly, very quickly, and people were confused. And reading these newspapers, you see ads for tonics and creams that might save you, which strikes the reader now as so problematic. But the lesson that I wanted to draw us toward, which also comes out when reading these newspapers from 100 years ago, were the extraordinary stories actually of courage and compassion. The newspapers are littered with stories calling for nurses to step forward and people to step forward and serve in hospital wards where the chances were they might get the influenza, but seemingly people were coming forward, stepping up and acting in sort of remarkable acts of simple courage when the chances of falling sick were high. And one realizes that this was happening at a time of World War I, where there were consistent stories of courage and bravery sort of littering the newspapers. And so that sort of sense of courage was brought home to America, I think. And I shared with my students last week this sense that these times call for bravery and courage. And I would say Jewish tradition has no shortage of these moments, sadly, where catastrophe calls for bravery and courage. And I sort of took refuge in this history of influenza where there was both devastation, but repeated acts of grace and courage, and really models of inspiration for me personally about willingness to step into the breach and act in profound ways to help people in need. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Dean Moore, as we approach our final minutes together, what wisdom and hope do you share with our communities as we move towards Passover and Easter?
Let me, is there time to say two briefly?
Yes.
Okay, because Dean Judson's story about this newspaper is really meaningful to me, and I've been doing something similar and going back to Julian of Norwich. When she was 14th, 15th century, and she, during a time of life-threatening illness, had visions of Jesus. Showings of divine love is what she called them. And at one point in one of these showings or revelations, she experienced Jesus saying to her, "All shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well." And that did not come to her as a naive comment, but she argued with Jesus back and forth for all the decades after that as she theologized about these revelations. But it became an undercurrent in her life. All shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. And for me, it's a reminder that the undercurrent is God's promises and God's presence through this, not some kind of naive hope that everything is magically going to be better tomorrow, but an awareness of that deep presence and goodness of God. The other thing that's really been important to me in our Christian tradition are the narratives that are told about things that happened on Jesus' journeys. And a lot of those narratives have take place, and they're part of the lectionary text during the last journey to Jerusalem, and some of them occur earlier. But just to share one narrative, which has become important to me during this particular Lent, this narrative is told in all four Gospels, and it takes place on the road when a woman with a hemorrhage that would not end, and it went on for months and months, and isolated her socially, reaches out and touches the hem of Jesus' garment. And in this huge crowd, Jesus felt power going out of him, according to the story, and everything stopped. No one could believe that he would feel the touch of this woman's touch on the hem of his garment. But in that moment, the woman was healed, and Jesus says to her, "You're healed. Go in peace." And the better translation is go into or go toward peace. The awareness of the journey hasn't ended. But that particular narrative has become a mantra to me during this time. It's been a reminder that people are reaching out to touch our garments, and that it's very important for us to allow ourselves the openness to feel the touch and to respond. And the other thing it reminds me of is that the divine is present to feel our touch, and that no matter how overwhelmed we might be in moments, are misdirected, God is still feeling our touch.
Amen. Thank you. Dean Stegman, might we have one final word from you?
Yes, I guess I'm thinking about these days we have these long gospel readings on the Sundays, and this coming Sunday is the story of the Raising of Lazarus. And this might sound a bit odd because it's very impressive at one level, raising somebody from the dead. But the most powerful, the most impressive part of that story comes, for me, has always been, I've been touched by what Jesus says at the very end of that story. So we picture Lazarus who's been bound in burial cloths, and I'm not sure how he quite gets to the entrance of the tomb, but there he is, and he's alive. His heart's functioning, his lungs are functioning, but he's not fully alive because he's bound. And Jesus says to the onlookers, those right next to him, now unbind him. And it's that what we're celebrating in large part this season is this God whom Mary Elizabeth so eloquently said is with us, and with us in our sufferings, and is leading us. This God is redeeming us, wants to free us. And right now, I think many of us are bound by fear. We're bound by other things. And this God, the God of Passover, the God of Easter, the God who wants and does give life if we but receive it. And so I'm inviting myself and all of us to think of, how is God calling me to be unbound so that I can be that person who can help unbind others? Because ultimately, and I think of ministry, and what I think we're really all committed to here is being people who bring God and God's ways to others. And we're going through difficult times, and the desert is a place where God encounters people. It's also a place of testing, not in a morbid sense, but in effect, I think we're going to come out of this more authentic because we're realizing our real dependence upon God and one another. And the God who brings life out of death, who brings joy out of sorrow, who brings grace out of sin, it's a God that we need to fill our hearts more so that we can share that God with not only our words, but really with our lives. So that's how I'm feeling. The current situation is colliding with the season that we're celebrating and observing. And I hope that we propel into the Easter season and celebration of Passover, emboldened because we know we're loved and we want to share that love with others.
Dean Judson, Dean Moore, Dean Stegman, I just want to thank all of you for sharing with us these incredible words of wisdom and hope, and dare I also say healing. I know that I needed it, and I'm hopeful that others in this meeting did as well. So thank you all so very much.
Teddy, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that we need you to sing at this moment, because you are a multi-talented person, and one of your gifts is song. And after the depth of that conversation, before we go into more talking, would you gift us and grace us with whatever the Spirit moves you to share?
Certainly. The song that's on my heart is, it's a movement song, civil rights movement, that I actually learned from a rabbi friend of mine. And it says this: Courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. So patience, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Have patience, my friends, for we do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Gentleness, my friends, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home.
Thank you so much, Teddy. And thanks to our panelists. Dean Moore, by the way, I have a virtual bouquet for you. I had planned at the end of this panel discussion to hand you that bouquet in person, but I will send you the emoji later today. Tom Reed, are you there?
I am here, and I have the breakout rooms ready. I'm hoping people don't disappear because I've tried to divvy up people evenly, but I'm now going to open up. Oh, wait, I moved something the wrong one. Hold on a sec. I will now open up the rooms, and we can discuss. We'll come back at 11:15. You'll get a 1-minute warning when the room shut down or getting ready to close, and then you can exit your room. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to our panelists, and I'll open up the rooms now.
Tom, just a quick reminder, we're going to come back at 11, not at 11:15.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Break. Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you all for engaging in the small breakout rooms and for sharing whatever is on your heart and mind. I'm going to ask Dr. Judith Oleson to share some words of prayer. Then I'll see if I can cajole Dean Teddy to sing another song. And then we'll end with one short Jewish prayer, which will tie us back to the morning service. So, Judith, please take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, Rabbi Rose. Before I say my prayer, I want to give appreciation also to Dean Mary Elizabeth, because without her leadership, without her interfaith leadership, this event wouldn't even exist. And a number of years ago, she initiated with Rabbi Rose a partnership between BU School of Theology and Hebrew College, and this and many other initiatives have come out of it. And I give thanks for your leadership, Mary Elizabeth, in so many levels in our interfaith community. I'd also like to thank Tom Reed for organizing those small groups. They were really wonderful. And also to Marilyn Stern for all her work on this event. So I have a prayer that comes out of the Lutheran Church that I'll read. God, our peace and our strength, we pray for our nation and the world as we face new uncertainties. Protect the most vulnerable among us, especially all who are currently sick or in isolation. Grant wisdom, patience, and clarity to healthcare workers, especially as their work caring for others puts them at great risk. Guide us as we consider how we best prepare and respond in our families, congregations, workplaces, and communities. Give us courage to face these days, not with fear, but with compassion, concern, and acts of service, trusting that you abide with us always. Amen.
Amen. Teddy, I'm going to push my luck. I put you on the spot before. Do you have one other ditty for us before I close things out?
Yes, at the request of Dr. Judith Oleson, I'm going to sing a couple of verses of We Shall Overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we'll walk hand in hand someday. that's why I am not afraid. I am not afraid. I am not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Amen.
Amen. As a closing intention for this morning, a kavanah, I want to return to the SHACHARIT service. Today is Friday, and for every day of the week, it is customary to say a different psalm. And the psalm for Friday, in advance of Shabbat, which we'll repeat this evening with the psalm for Shabbat, is Psalm 93. That's the psalm for Friday. And in light of our earlier conversation with our panelists, I want to read just the beginning of the psalm and then its ending. Adonai malach geut lavesh, lavesh Adonai oz hitazar, af tikon tevel bal timot, nachon kisacha me'az, me'olam ata. The eternal reigns garbed in majesty. The eternal is garbed, girded with strength, so the world stands firm, unshakable. Your throne stands firm from of old, from eternity, it is you. Picking up on the comments from the deans, I want to say that I think one source of strength for us is the notion that hu haya, hu hoveh, v'hu yeh, that the divine or divinity, that source of life, which all of us partake of, is far greater than any virus or illness. And we are part of that. And so the rush of life, the flow, the breath will continue. And at the same time, we need to be attentive to this language of God's garbing. God's levush, according to the psalmist, is one of majesty. But as we heard before from Dean Moore, we have to pay attention to who is pulling on our garment, and are we responsive? Because the only way that God can be magnified and sanctified and adorned in majesty is if we partake of it. And so I pray that our efforts this morning, while we understand ultimately that this is beyond us, that God will be, there is much that we can and need to do, that our actions do matter, that the ways in which we interact with one another are consequential, that there are opportunities even virtually to reach out, to be of use and to be of service. So we participate in that glorious act of adorning the divine, of dressing God majestically. And I want to end with the closing words from Psalm 93. Edotecha nemnu meod, lehevetcha nav hakodesh, Adonai, leyorech yamim. Trustworthy indeed is all that attests to you. Holiness befits your house, Eternal One, for all the days to come. I bless everyone with good health, with resilience, and with the continued ability to act with as much kindness as we possibly can muster in this difficult time. Go in peace, everyone. We will follow up we will arrange for other opportunities across our schools and communities to reconnect after the holidays. So stay tuned. Go in peace.